All right, hello class. We begin another week, and this is our second to last week in the class, so the class is really winding down here. We're almost done, so make sure you can carry on and continue through. There is quite a lot to do this week, and this week is about qualitative data collection and analysis. And so the first thing that you need to know about this is that qualitative data analysis is a longer process, certainly, than quantitative data analysis. Quantitative data analysis involves running some math, doing some statistics, and figuring out what the answer is numerically. But qualitative data analysis is a much longer process in which we examine a whole bunch of data and try to find themes and content and try to make sense of all of the mountain of data that you've collected with qualitative research. So those of you who have a qualitative research proposal, you're going to have to discuss in detail your analysis process in the final proposal that you'll submit this week and tell exactly what you're going to do to analyze the data. So anyway, the week's activities include chapters 19, 20, and 21, so it's quite a lot actually this week on qualitative data collection and data analysis, as well as preparing a research report. And then you'll talk about qualitative and quantitative data in the discussion. Talk about what kind of data will be collected in your proposal, what will you do with the data collected, even though you actually won't collect the data itself, but what would somebody do with it? How would decisions be made with the data results? And how will learning about research help your decision-making process in the future? So that's the discussion. You'll complete the quizzes for the chapters as usual. And then you'll complete the final proposal. And this is a compilation of all of the other work that you've done so far, plus these new items in bold. So all the items that you've done for work before include the title, introduction, purpose of the research study, all those different things that you want to submit. But you want to revise these before you submit them to me so that you can make sure that they are, that they're the best that you can. And then also add the cover page, and I think a lot of you already have that. And then the abstract. And then finally the data analysis methods, the planned data analysis methods that you plan to use. So obviously if it's quantitative research, you'll want to talk about what statistics you want to use. And if it's qualitative research, you're going to talk about the things that we learned this week for qualitative data analysis. Now remember also to follow APA format for all of these items, because this is your final proposal. And APA format for the abstract it means that the abstract is going to be on its own page, the cover page is going to be its own page, and all of these things. So take a look at that and make sure you submit that correctly. There is a final research proposal example down here that can help guide you with the format as well. And there are other ones, I think under general class items there are some example work from the past. And I think there's more than one final research proposal example here. So you can see those as well. So that's the work for this class, for this week. One thing I did want to talk about, though, are some of these concepts of qualitative data analysis and qualitative data collection. So first off, we'll talk about qualitative data collection. It is field work, is what they call it. When you're out in the field, you are immersing yourself as a researcher in the setting of your study over time. So qualitative data analysis, or data collection anyway, the process is much more involved and much longer than quantitative. And that involves, you being in the setting over time. So again, if you have a qualitative research proposal, you're going to have to talk very clearly about how long you'll be in the field and what are your data collection instruments and how much time, how many weeks you'll spend, how many hours per week, and so forth. But qualitative data collections include the following: observations, interviews, questionnaires, and document analysis. And so there's a whole bunch of different methods here that you can use to collect information. But these are the main four that you're going to be using in the qualitative area. So observations obviously means watching participants. And you can be a participant observer or a non-participant observer. And that participant observer means the researcher is involved while observing. It's involved in the activities in whatever they're doing as a participant. A non-participant observation or observer involves the researcher not participating in the whatever it is. You're not part of the activity. You're more like a fly on the wall. And then observations are recorded using field notes, and there are often protocols used that guide your note taking. They might say, how many instances of X, Y, or Z did you see? And there's often a guide. So this is an example of an observation protocol. The researcher can mark down the different items that they have seen during this behavior or during this observation. This is for animals, but it could be used for humans or whatever else you might use. And here's another one, example of an observation protocol that somebody has taken. They try to fill out what exactly happens during every time that they observe something. So it can be very structured, actually, this observation in qualitative research. And here's another example. And here's another one. All right, the next method is interviews, and you can have structured or unstructured interviews. Structured just means that there are predetermined questions that are outlined, and you follow those questions very, very carefully. Unstructured means that it's more like a conversation. You let the interview go wherever it wants to go. But obviously for interviews, listening skills is important, and allowing for silence and not judging. With qualitative research, if you have interviews as part of your qualitative research, you do not want to be taking notes during the interviews. Instead, you record the interview. You find a device that you can record it with. Nowadays, you can use almost anything. And then transcribe the interview later. That means that any qualitative research is going to involve you recording the interviews and then afterward transcribing every word of the interview. So you can see why it would take so long. It takes a very long time to do this type of transcription. So here's an example of a nice structured interview. These are the questions that they want to have answered. And you'll read about different groups of interviews later, different types. Questionnaires this is an example of qualitative questionnaire. Now questionnaires, don't get too confused about this because, questionnaires can be a quantitative instrument as well. You can have a multiple choice closed type answer. But in this case, it's an open answer, right? People write down what would make you want to go to a festival. How many festivals can you name? Why do you think most festivals are important to have? So these questions are more about feelings and they require an open-ended response. And that's why it's qualitative. And then document analysis is the last method that we're going to talk about today, and that just means that you might look at artifacts or documents to determine information for your study, to gather data for your study. So this could include documents from an archive, journals, maps, video and audio, and other artifacts. So those are the qualitative data collection methods that you might follow as part of qualitative study. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the qualitative data analysis process as well. Qualitative data analysis means that you summarize data in a dependable and accurate manner. And any researcher or anyone who's going to review your work will hold you to this. They'll expect you to follow a sort of systematic manner or systematic process in analyzing your qualitative data. And you're going to interpret the data as well, and that's trying to find meaning in the data. So qualitative data analysis and interpretation are formidable tasks, and it is difficult and time-consuming and challenging and takes a lot of patience. And it also includes a lot of reflection of your own experiences and begins in the field while you collect the qualitative data, you can start to analyze it as well. And one big important thing here is don't jump to conclusions. So you might be in the field, your first day out in the field, you might hear a certain theme that people keep talking about, and you're like, oh, that's going to be one of the major themes of my research. But then over time, it might turn out that that was only one thing that they talked about only on the first day. So try not to jump to conclusions when it comes to qualitative research. So there is a qualitative data analysis process, and that involves organizing all of the materials that you have. So you might have a combination of observations and interviews and, let's say, some documents that you have examined, and you are going to have to organize these somehow. And usually that is by themes that come out of those. So if somebody talked about the one theme in an interview and that same theme was covered in a document, you'll want to put those together and kind of start to organize those. Then you're going to categorize them. So you're going to start thinking about what people have talked about in the interviews, what observations have you made, and try to make categories to fit those into. It's a very big process to try to organize qualitative data. And then you're starting to put them together. So you're going to make it more clear exactly what categories there are and synthesize them together. And then you're going to analyze the results. So you kind of talk about the analyzing kind of takes, you might take excerpts from one that exemplifies the theme that you have been finding or the content that you've been finding or the categories. And then you analyze those and put those all together and put the quotes with them so that you can go back to the data. And then finally, you're going to write it up. You're going to write up the process and tell what exactly did come out of the research. What did people feel or say about these different events or experiences or whatever it is that you're studying with qualitative data. So it's a very different process from quantitative analysis. So we won't cover these because I just talked about them, but if you think about qualitative data analysis, it's really a matter of finding what themes come out of it. You're exploring. You're not trying to confirm something that you already know. You're trying to explore something that you don't know. And then out of that process, you find different themes. And what are the themes that have come out? Here's the theme A and theme B and theme C, and there might be 10 of them. There might be 15, 20. There could be a lot. And then you start to say, okay, well, these are the themes. What are the pieces of data that support these themes? And so then you take the data that you have found, and you might quote it from an interview, or you might talk about it from an observation. I observed these things happening. And each theme you have to back up with that data. And then finally you're going to write it up and say these are the themes that came out of the research. So it's really a process that's not for the faint of heart. It's a long process and it takes a lot of time, particularly with transcription of interviews, typing all of those up, and then also finding the themes and going through the content of the interviews, observations, questionnaires, and document analysis, or whatever else, or whatever combination of those four that you actually do for your quantitative study or qualitative study. So, well, that's qualitative data analysis, and also we talked about qualitative data collection. But that's about it for this week. We are winding down. There are 2 assignments due next week on evaluating research reports, but you'll have ample time, I think, to do those, and they give you a template to work from on that. And then that will finish the class out. So good luck this week.